If you think you know the story of the coronavirus pandemic, let me tell you, you don't. I sat down with Dr. Peter McCullough and discussed the power, politics, and science that was behind the greatest peacetime policy failure in human history. Dr. McCullough was one of the most vocal voices of dissent from the outset during the pandemic. His insights and expert opinions can't be ignored, and our governments know this. We live through a time period of horrific government overreach, corruption, and dismantling of our healthcare systems. We're currently witnessing the unraveling of the COVID narrative with the admission that the vaccines are harmful, that they cause massive increase in heart disease and death in young people, and God knows how many more long-term side effects. The lawsuits, the online comments, and research are all important pieces of healing from this period of global injustice. But what are we going to do to ensure this never happens again? That's the question I'm going to leave with you while you watch this episode. If you're a fan of truth and want to be part of the health revolution here on the Hard to Kill podcast, make sure to hit subscribe and add a comment down below. My new book, Harden to Fuck Up, was written as a guide for anybody that follows the podcast and wants to put together all the things that they've learned from amazing guests. It is Dallas Alexander approved. Tim Jensen from Grunstyle wrote the foreword. And if you want to lose weight, you want to get a grip of your health, your waistline, and your mental health this year, I strongly recommend going to Amazon and getting your ebook, audiobook, or paperback copy immediately. Would love to hear a review, and train hard, fight easy. Let's get back to the episode. Hey folks, as you may have seen, I just got back from a BJJ and healing retreat for veterans put on by David and Cordy from Becoming Ohm, a husband and wife team doing incredible work for veterans' mental health. But my involvement with them actually started before that. I've been working with them in their online coaching program for the last 3 months, and I'm already signed up for 3 more. What I love about this program is that it meets you right at where you're at. You don't have to fly to Mexico or go sit in the jungle to start healing. They help you make real changes in your day-to-day life while teaching you how to work with plant medicine in a safe, intentional, and grounded way. This isn't some weird hippie stuff, but like a legit way to improve your mental health. For me, it's helped me stay more present with my family and respond better in situations that used to set me off. They've worked with over 100 veterans, first responders, and civilians in the last couple of years. If you want to learn more, go follow them on Instagram at becoming.ohm and shoot them a message with the words hard to kill. David will hook you up with all the info plus a special offer just for listeners of the podcast. Becoming Ohm has been a huge part of my journey, and I know that can help you too. Even if you've been let down by everything modern medicine or Veterans Affairs has to offer you so far. Folks, I'm sitting down with a very special guest today. Dr. Peter McCullough is an internist, cardiologist, epidemiologist holding degrees from Baylor University, University of Texas Southwestern Medical School, University of Michigan, and Southern Methodist University. Dr. McCullough has broadly published on a range of topics in medicine with over 1,000 publications and over 700 citations in the National Library of Medicine. Dr. McCullough is a well-known public figure in medicine and is a frequent contributor on numerous mainstream and independent media platforms. He has testified multiple times in the U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives, European Parliament, and many state capitals concerning public health policy. Dr. McCullough, it's such an honor. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me on the program.
Absolutely. So, like I said before we went live here, COVID was a really big deal for me because it woke me up. I was of the opinion that the government had most of the time our best interests in mind. That started to wane when I started to realize they weren't being totally forthcoming with the evidence in terms of policy, in terms of lockdowns. And it was your appearance actually on Joe Rogan that really opened my eyes to a whole other world. And I think a lot of Canadian veterans here kind of saw a brand new world open up because of your bravery for going on shows like Joe Rogan and speaking truth to power. So it's really important that we start unraveling kind of everything that happened over that COVID era. And you're such a great voice of dissent from the traditional and mainstream opinion that I can't wait to hear what you have to say and updates from the last 4 years. So the way I want to frame this is you said something really important about censorship when you were talking to Joe Rogan. And I'll just quote you here. There is no bigger health crisis than the impact of censorship in COVID-19. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And would you say that there's more to it 4 years down the line since you did that interview with Joe Rogan?
Well, thanks for having me on the program. Let me just say that the context is a public health emergency. We could pick another context. We could pick war, and the veterans would understand this. When we're in a crisis, if there's any censorship or suppression of information on one side or the other, it's going to deviate us from the truth. And when we get off target and we deviate from the truth, we are very likely going to make mistakes and people are going to be harmed. Now, I can tell you for sure in a biological threat crisis like this. So here we're making observations, and if there's suppression, systematic suppression of one set of observations on one side, it's going to swing us in the wrong direction. And we may be years to getting back to the truth. And so what we saw during the pandemic was systematic suppression of any hope at early treatment, any multi-drug protocols, anything that anybody could do to help prevent getting the infection or reducing its intensity and severity. And then later on, we saw systematic suppression of any information on vaccine side effects. And those two big forms of suppression, fit in avoidable illness, hospitalization, and death, and actually avoidable side effects, which include injuries, disabilities, and death. So censorship was very big. And I wasn't the only person to say this. Our current FDA commissioner, Marty Makary, said that censorship was effectively killing people.
I'm always curious as to why. In your opinion, why do you think there was such a strong push for censorship on treating people, which seems like, I'm not a doctor, but it seems like a normal course of action that as a doctor, you're given the responsibility to figure out treatments, and your treatment might be a little different from somebody else's. And since there's a novel new virus, hey, let's get together, let's discuss this, and let's figure out the most efficient way to save as many lives as possible. But that seems like it didn't happen. Here in Canada, there was no discussion. It was shut up, stay at home, don't breathe on people. And I thought that was very, very weird. So why do you think they just kind of suppressed all the potential treatments that were out there?
Well, there's a wrong concept at the base of what you were portraying. And that is the concept that we are presented is you could avoid getting the infection. Turns out 97% of us got it. Can you imagine if the messaging was different? Saying, listen, we're all going to get it. Don't even bother wearing a mask or trying to lock down. We're all going to get it. So just make sure you get a mild case of it and get through it. Can you imagine if that was the messaging? Do you remember contact tracing? This idea of, well, you had it. Who did you come in contact with? That was all predicated on the fact that you could avoid getting it. And think about the resources spent on these ridiculous activities. No one actually mentions contact tracing anymore. But I really got some insight on when I testified in the U.S. House of Representatives about a year ago. So I was in Washington, and I was on a panel, and I was the key witness on the panel, getting grilled for hours. And we had a couple of breaks. And Anthony Fauci, former White House coronavirus senior advisor, former NIAID director at NIH, he had just testified 2 days before me. Same panel, but in a closed session. Mine was televised. So I had a chance, at some breaks to talk to some of the panel members. And I said, what'd you learn from the Fauci testimony? And essentially what they said was he admitted the whole purpose of this pandemic was to get the world mass vaccinated. That this had been the dream of those who, in a sense, were behind the creation of SARS-CoV-2 and the lockdowns and social distancing, the irrational exuberance over vaccination, mandates of vaccination, all the factors we've talked about, David, led somebody to conclude that the only thing they could do would be to take a vaccine.
I'm kind of blown away at that statement, I'll be honest. If that's the case, now I have the obvious question, well, why though? Why is this particular vaccine so important that somebody needed to get it, that they would deploy all their resources, potentially, because they're putting on the table the trust in public health. So this was like an all-in play then.
It was.
But why? I don't understand.
But let's examine the evidence of just your observation. Was it an all-in play? Well, you could say every world government was convinced to administer the vaccines, actually buy large quantities of them. Within a few months, every world government was convinced that boosters needed to be given over and over and over again. Every single aspect of medicine was convinced to endorse the vaccines. So adult medicine, pediatric medicine, obstetrics, gynecology, all the medical subspecialties. All the militaries of the world were, convinced. Think about it. This was an all-in effort. All the cards were laid out on the table. That's a great observation. Everything was put behind this. Do you know the Biden administration had a Health and Human Services program called the COVID Community Core, CORPS program. Billions and billions of dollars went in. And they poured money into thousands of media stations to run pro-vaccine statements and interviews. They had a whole program for pastors and ministers. It was called Faith for Vaccines. So the religious community would support vaccination. There was relentless public health advertising for vaccines everywhere you went, social media. There was complete social media suppression of vaccine side effects. So people would be led to believe that the vaccines are perfectly safe because we're not hearing anything about side effects on Instagram or YouTube or any of the meta platforms. If you actually went in Google and you said, please list the COVID-19 vaccine side effects in Google, the response would come back and it would say, the vaccines are safe and effective. And it just wouldn't even tell you anything about side effects. So it was an all-in effort. I think that's a very, very good observation. An all-in global effort at mass vaccination.
My original take on the vaccine was, it'll be fine. It's just going to be like the flu shot. So if you want to go line up for it, get it. And it is what it is. I remember stating that on the show. Hey, if you feel like you need it, go ahead. But typically if you're young and healthy, and we're already a year in, if you haven't really had a bad bout of it or you're pretty healthy, odds are you probably won't have to go get it. So just live your life and enjoy. And this is what it is. I was very laid back and just using my rational brain to assess the situation. But then once they started coming out with the passports and they started coming out with the forced vaccination to work, I lost my job because of it. Then nothing made sense anymore. And in terms of the military, that's where it kind of woke me up even more, because I wasn't in the military anymore, but I'm closely adjacent to it, working with the veteran population. And so many veterans were losing their job because they wouldn't get in line for a shot that they knew they didn't need. And the awful thing about the whole thing is that we now have the documentation that the military itself, the Surgeon General, said we don't need this. Enough of our military members are vaccinated. So let's push this off and just let the ones that want to get it, and so be it. But they absolutely needed everybody vaccinated because the political masters needed the military to set the example, which is so mind-boggling to me that you would force your military members to get it and then essentially crush the morale of the military. But it happened in the US as well. And like you said, this was a global effort. So I was surprised at how everybody fell in line. All the Western nations fell in line. But my main question is, like, how did they have a vaccine ready so fast with, I think, 3 or 4 different companies? Because I remember telling my wife, I'm like, I don't know, this is going to be long. It's going to take at least 5 years before they even have a vaccine ready on the market, let alone like tested, all that stuff. It's going to take years. This might be really brutal, but within a year, boom, we have a vaccine. How did that happen so fast? I'm curious to know what you think about
that. There was a paper written by Lalani and colleagues, British Medical Journal, and it highlights that there had been a multi-billion-dollar investment in messenger RNA, a new genetic technology that was so revolutionary that once we knew the genetic code for any protein, that messenger RNA literally could be drawn up on a computer screen in a matter of minutes. And the methodology was there to take that genetic code and then use fairly rapid biological systems to physically make the messenger RNA. And a key piece to this was to load it into a lipid nanoparticle, so it would be stable as particle concentrations in solution. So all of these concepts have been coming together since 1985. And so really this whole field was waiting for the opportunity. Now, because of the SARS-1 outbreak in 2001, there was already a little scare that there could be a coronavirus epidemic or pandemic coming. There was work done in Wuhan, China, and the key people were Dr. Ralph Baric at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He's actually the most published person on coronaviruses in the world. Peter Daszak at the EcoHealth Alliance, he was a go-between between China and Baric. And Dr. Anthony Fauci, he was the division head of the National Allergy, Immunology, Infectious Disease branch at NIH. Those four teamed up with Dr. Xingling Li, the bat lady in Wuhan. And so they set out to actually modify a human coronavirus with a bat coronavirus spike protein, and to get that to be able to invade a humanized epithelial tract in animals. And they announced their success in publications at the end of 2015 and 2016. And the title of the papers were A SARS-like Wuhan Institute of Virology 1 covirus poised for human emergence. So these two papers basically laid it out. It said it's gain-of-function research. It started before the US funding ban in 2017. That, in fact, they thank the Chinese for their participation. They thank Peter Daszak for running it. They thank the National Institutes of Health. So if one was paying attention to this, they'd say, listen, these two papers, Nature Communications, Proceedings in Natural Academy of Sciences, those were big news. Just the following year, in 2017, there was a tabletop exercise by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Health called the SPARS pandemic. It said, we're going to have a coronavirus, and it's going to come from China. It's going to make us all sick. If we were paying attention, we would have showed up to the meeting, or we would have read its proceedings. It was published on the internet. By the way, as soon as the COVID pandemic hit, that School of Public Health, they published two papers and said, hey, we called it back in 2017. And then you and I really should have paid attention in November of 2019, when again, the Gates Foundation and Bloomberg School of Public Health teamed up, and they held this Event 201, where they brought over George Gao, the Chinese CDC director, Avril Haines, who was an associate of the World Economic Forum. Avril Haines ultimately became the director of national intelligence under Joe Biden, state senators, other people. And they said, there's going to be a coronavirus pandemic, and we are going to lock down, and we're going to try to get everybody to take a vaccine. So this was filmed. There's transcripts on this. So there was so much work done ahead of time that companies like Moderna, they were thoroughly expecting a coronavirus pandemic. And in fact, in the dossier that was uncovered from Fauci's emails and the COVID Select Subcommittee, there's an email from Stéphane Bancel over to Ralph Baric's lab essentially saying, hey, can we get a copy of the strain so we can test it for a vaccine? They executed a material transfer agreement in 2019. Moderna was actually ready to go. Moderna, its patents are co-owned by the U.S. government, so they're working hand in glove with the U.S. government. So in March of 2020, when Trump comes out and says we have a national COVID emergency, it was 3 days later. Stéphane Bancel says we've got a vaccine for that.
3 days.
3 days. But the idea is they have been working on it for a long time. Remember, they don't need egg cultures. They don't need to isolate the virus. All they needed was the genetic code for the spike protein.
Okay. Let me see if I comprehend what's going on here. So they're working on gain of function in a Wuhan lab. There's all kinds of funding. They're excited about it. They published a paper, so it's in plain sight, right?
2 papers.
Okay. Then it allows the companies to start making the vaccine, so the cure for the problem. The problem then somehow gets released, whether accidental or not. And then the companies that were in on the creation of the vaccines make out like bandits and make billions and billions of dollars. Is that as simple as it gets? Like, is that what the play is? Was that the all-in play? Let's just make a ton of money.
If you were, in the business of making vaccines and money and these non-compete government contracts, the only thing that really could spoil this is if everybody got COVID all at once and they got natural immunity pretty quickly. So one of the ways to stop that is to lock everybody down. Say, listen, and remember that, so many days to slow the spread. We don't want everybody to get it just yet. And another thing you'd have to do is you have to kill early treatment. If people thought there was a treatment option, they'd be more likely to go out and say, listen, I'll just take some medicine if I get sick, and I don't need to wait for a vaccine. Basically, a plan had to be carried out for people to understand the only thing they could do is wait for a vaccine.
Now, I'm no virologist or epidemiologist, but I believe it's against doctrine, correct me if I'm wrong, to vaccinate when you're in the middle of a pandemic because you can cause mutations. Am I right?
No, that's exactly right. You would never want to vaccinate in the middle of a highly prevalent pandemic because it's just like giving an antibiotic to everybody in a hospital ward. There's going to be resistant bugs. You got it. And that's exactly what happened. And, during 2020, I was the co-principal investigator of a vaccine program. I was at a major medical center and we were marshaling forward the Modulon vaccine from Denmark. And it was a cellular-based vaccine. And I remember when I presented this to Operation Warp Speed, we had calls with the government. I said, listen, at the most, 2.7 million Americans to take a vaccine, at the most. We're talking nursing home residents, those in congregate living, very frail, and the workers, in immediate contact with them. No more than that. But you can see what happened with these COVID vaccines when they rolled out. They said, listen, healthcare workers, nursing home patients, before you know it, pregnant women, everybody take it. Children, babies. And now here we are 4 years later, we have 70 million children in the United States. It turns out 9 million last year took a booster because the COVID shots are on the routine schedule. And, at the same time, my mom is in a senior home here in Dallas, and they have not brought out the vaccines or discussed them in years. So let me tell you what, you don't see any commercials to have nursing home patients vaccinated, what have you. You see a relentless push on the children who would have no medical necessity, no clinical indication, no rationale to vaccinate children. And then the elderly who still could be at risk for bad outcomes, no interest whatsoever.
Okay, that's confusing to me. And I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. Are the health officials playing with are they playing the game, hey, we'd rather be safe than sorry with the children, even though the evidence shows that the virus itself, it doesn't really harm children or anybody really under the age of 60, if I'm not correct. But we still want an mRNA vaccine in the children based on just our legacy perception of the virus. Is that what's going on? Or is there something more nefarious there?
Remember I told you when Fauci told the panel it was about global vaccination. A key component to global vaccination is the children, because the children are on a intensified schedule. So if you could get all children to take a new vaccine, from a vaccinologist perspective, that could be considered a great victory. But there is some type of distorted groupthink here. And I was interested in an article published where it was a survey of Brazilian judges, over 1,000 Brazilian judges, who believed it was existential that Brazilian babies receive the COVID-19 vaccine. And so as we sit here today, if you had a 6-month-old in Brazil, the child must take the COVID shot. And if the parents decline, the parents get a $30,000 US fine, or they spend time in jail. I mean, they're not playing around in Brazil. Why would they believe that? The judge, and of course, parents are desperate. They're having court cases. The judges believe, and the government and public health believes, that it's the children, not the elderly, not the vulnerable, that should be taking COVID vaccines over and over again.
That's unreal. I did not know that. That is wild information. In terms of the vaccine itself, I took the vaccine. I lined up. I had so many questions, though, just because I know what mRNA is. I have a degree in biochem. My concern was, well, what's this going to transcribe into? How do I know that they did it correctly? Where does it go? Oh, no, it just stays in the site that you get injection. I'm like, that's not how I understand how this works. This is going to be systemic. But I still went. I got it. But afterwards, I was freaking out a little bit.
Mm,
A few months later, it was essentially just stress, but I was experiencing tightness in my chest, and I went, "Oh my God, maybe do I
mm.
have myocarditis?" So I went to the hospital. Nope, you're good. Okay. But knowing that men that are relatively young, I'm, in my young 40s, were dropping heart attacks. Boom.
Mm, mhm.
Athletes. Boom. What's going on there? What does the mRNA vaccine do to young men that is causing individuals that seem to be healthy to just drop dead?
Those are all correct observations. Let me just ask you, David, what brand did you take?
Both were Pfizer.
Both were Pfizer. Did he have the opportunity to take any other brand of vaccine?
Good question. I think Moderna was available, but I chose Pfizer because I just had this. I had no idea the difference between the two, but in my mind, I trusted the Germans more than Moderna. That's it. That's all it was.
Well, it turns out Pfizer, which was released December 10th, 2020, had about 6 weeks lead time on Moderna. Pfizer's 30 micrograms of messenger RNA. Now, Moderna comes out 6 weeks later. It's 100 micrograms of messenger RNA, 3 times the dose. And when you compare those two, and every study that's ever compared it, Moderna is more dangerous. It's more dangerous. So a good paper to quote is by Husby and colleagues. Now, about another month after that, in the United States was Janssen, which is an adenoviral vector vaccine, still a genetic vaccine producing uncontrolled amounts of spike protein, but it's not messenger RNA. The Janssen vaccine was initially just one shot. This looked desirable, but very quickly they said the Janssen vaccine needed 2 shots and that Pfizer and Moderna needed boosters. Now, in the United States, there was actually a 4th vaccine that comes out. It actually had very good data, just as good as Pfizer and Moderna on theoretical efficacy. And it was ready to go June of 2021. And the FDA delays it. And I'm talking about the Novavax vaccine. The FDA delays it for a full year. And so Novavax does come out on the market in the summer of 2022. And this is just 5 micrograms of the spike protein. No genetic production. No genetic production. That's essentially what we had in the US and Canada. And I've always said, listen, if I was forced to take a vaccine, someone put a gun to my head, I would have taken Novavax because there's no genetics. The body would just have to fight off this spike protein and it'd be good. Now, elsewhere, if we were in India or China or South America, we could have actually taken the Sinopharm or Coronavac vaccine. That was just the killed virus. They had isolated the COVID virus, grew it up, and then killed it and gave it just like they killed a flu shot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, while it had side effects way more than a flu shot, that was certainly, probably the least injurious. So I take Novavax or Coronavac. But the disappointment here is our public health agencies were not outlining the choices. They weren't saying what's available. Senator Rand Paul had discovered that Pfizer and Moderna used the same marketing firm, Weber Shandwick. And Weber Shandwick had an installed marketing office right in the US CDC vaccine center.
No.
Yes. And Rand Paul wrote Rochelle Lewinsky, said, you can't do this. Lewinsky had paid them millions of dollars to kind of promote messenger RNA vaccines. And that's the reason why Janssen and Novavax essentially got no mention. Now, as it turns out, Janssen, which causes a big explosion of spike protein early on associated with blood clots, it's identical to the AstraZeneca vaccine that the UK had. By the way, they're made by the same biodefense contractor outside of Baltimore. It's called Emergent Biosolutions. So why are vaccines made by military defense contractors? That is a great concern. But it turns out that that Janssen and AstraZeneca, they pull off the market after a couple of years. They said, you know what? We got too many blood clots. They just pull off the market. Novavax is still in there. The observation, though, the real focus has been on Pfizer and Moderna. Turns out in the United States, of those who took a vaccine, we think about 80% of the U.S. population took a vaccine. We think that number in Canada is probably 95%. Of those who took a shot, 94% took a messenger RNA vaccine, Pfizer or Moderna, which is apparently what our CDC and Health Canada and all the provincial royal colleges, what they wanted. They wanted messenger RNA vaccination. The public health agencies were not neutral on this. They really wanted people to take this. So what we've learned is that the human heart, with all of its blood flow, avidly takes up the messenger RNA. That's not good. We should not have the human heart taking up foreign protein. And young men take it up more than young women. It may be due to androgens and this whole human performance aspect of myocardial blood flow. The messenger RNA is found in the human heart. An autopsy paper by Crossan and colleagues from Harvard has shown that. The spike protein is produced in copious amounts in the heart, and it damages the heart, causes inflammation. It's been stained in the heart by Baumeier and colleagues who took biopsies of young children. Yonker and colleagues at Harvard showed that the children being damaged by myocarditis are producing tons of spike protein, and the antibodies are missing it. So the spike protein is the spine on the surface of the virus, and this is the spike protein. The vaccine doesn't produce the whole ball. It just produces the spike and tons of it. And if the antibodies don't neutralize the spike, it's circulating in the blood, damaging the hearts of these children. Myocarditis became explosive during the pandemic. It was so bad that by June of 2021, the FDA and CDC held emergency meetings. They said, listen, Pfizer and Moderna are causing myocarditis, heart inflammation. Well, let me tell you, as a cardiologist, when there's myocarditis of any cause, and it's very rare, it can be caused by Coxsackie virus or other causes, we can never allow exercise, never. As with a surge of adrenaline, if the heart has inflammation, it's going to trigger a cardiac arrest. That's the reason why our guidelines say you got an athlete with myocarditis. Back in 2010, I couldn't let him play. I'm a cardiologist, and so I deal with this. So we knew immediately that vaccinating any young person was going to be risky, particularly those who play sports. And then the data started coming in where this acute myocarditis result, which was obvious heart damage by EKG, by imaging, elevations in blood tests called cardiac troponin. I guarantee you had that done when you went to the ER. And heart failure, cardiac arrest, it was explosive. About 90% of the myocarditis cases required hospitalization. So by definition, it was serious. 2 studies demonstrated the acute mortality rate of this myocarditis. In one study I was a co-author on, the mortality rate was 2.9%. The other paper from Japan was 9%. I mean, any illness that causes a 9% mortality in young people is frightening. It takes a lot to kill a young person.
No kidding.
Right.
Almost 10% of it. That's
right.
insane.
Right. You can't save them. If people say, well, how often does this happen? There were 2 prospective cohort studies, Mansugian from Thailand and then Bergen from Switzerland. And they showed the rate of heart damage per shot was about 2.5%. So let me tell you what, this is scary business. If you got 2.5% of people getting heart damage, and let's just say 5% of that 2.5%, had death, that would explain these stochastic events of cardiac arrest. And they started pouring in European athletes, and we published on this, greatly concerned. We learned that the peak age was between 18 and 24, 90% were men. And that the initial risk was the first few weeks after the shots, but then there's an entire penumbra that exists to this day, and it's what we call subclinical vaccine myopericarditis. That means there's little heart damage going on. People don't know it. Now, a recent paper from Japan in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, a very good journal, has shown micro scars in the heart of those who took the shots. You can't see it on EKG or ultrasound or MRI, micro scars, and people are still having cardiac arrests years after the shots.
That's wild. To go back to the different shots and who produced them, Pfizer and Moderna, I know that the Canadian Armed Forces forced Moderna on all the troops. Yeah. And I've had numerous vaccine injured soldiers on my show. Some are in bad way. They've lost their careers. They're
Mm.
Some of them paralyzed. They, lost their careers in the special forces. And they acknowledged it. It's 100% because of these shots. So the Army has acknowledged it, or the military has acknowledged it, but our Veterans Affairs isn't acknowledging, which is a very weird position to take. And funny enough, yes, they were pretty much all Moderna shots, and they didn't have an option, from what I understood, of another treatment. However, speaking of the spike protein, now, in terms of, you're talking about like the penumbra, like years down the line, the heart has a little bit of damage. Probably you wouldn't even notice, just enjoying your life. Hey, I think I'm in the clear. You've come up with a novel approach to detoxify from spike protein. And that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show, because I've got my nattokinase here. I've got my bromelain. So when your paper showed up, I went, because I was still in the midst of, I don't know if I have any lingering effects from this. I'm healthy as is. However, if this spike protein is still circulating, I want to get rid of it. I don't want it in my bloodstream. So can we get into that in terms of what can somebody do if they are concerned that there's still spike protein circulating in their blood, and what your paper actually entails?
You found the source, of note. I was the first to publish the most widely used protocol to treat COVID-19. And it was copyrighted McCullough Protocol, early treatment protocol, American Journal of Medicine, August of 2020. And it could have been McGill, could have been University of Toronto, Harvard. It wasn't. It was me. You're actually looking at them. You're looking at, you have to wonder, why didn't any of our academic institutions, why didn't they want to claim that prize? The McCullough Protocol on early treatment has been credited with saving tens of millions of lives and sparing hundreds of millions of hospitalizations. It's the biggest medical claim that any researcher could ever make. I had a team of authors. I was the first author. I wrote it all. I was the principal creator of the ideas. I wrote the follow-up paper. I included 50 the early treatment doctors who were using the methods. So here I am. I've made my contribution. We're getting through the pandemic. Now we're on the back end. We're seeing all these vaccine injuries. And again, there's no Harvard protocol. There's no Duke protocol, the Canadian. There's no Karolinska Institute. Nobody actually has an approach for people who took the vaccine are having problems, and many of them are having them. So the Biden administration spends $1 billion on this. It's called the HHS Long COVID program. They don't study the vaccine at all. They completely ignore the vaccine, but they study the virus. Not a single project measured or considered the spike protein. Not a single one. The spike protein is stuck in the human body. It's causing all these problems. It's found in the heart, found in the brain, is causing blood clots, and is causing symptoms of long COVID, and the spike protein is causing vaccine injury symptoms. So, dealing with this over a few years, I had come to the conclusion, carefully studying patients, the human body can't get rid of the spike protein. It cannot. It seems to be indestructible. And so we started to search for methods by which we could dissolve the spike protein. And Dr. Tanakawa in Japan gets a lot of credit, where he had discovered that nattokinase dissolves the spike protein in intact cell and cell lysate models. And then bromelain was found to dissolve it. Bromelain's a family of enzymes derived from pineapple. And then curcumin, that had gone all the way to human trials. It doesn't dissolve the spike protein, but it clearly blocks spike protein inflammation. So those three became the base for McCullough Protocol-based spike protein detoxification. Again, copyrighted my name for accountability reasons, and so people could know what they're talking about. It was promulgated. You go on Amazon right now, there's McCullough Protocol all over the place. There's combination products. The best one is called the Ultimate Spike Detox from the Wellness Company. Now I'm the chief scientific officer of the company, but that has medicinal grade and the highest doses of nattokinase, bromelain, curcumin, plus some minor ingredients. So out of the box, 2 capsules twice a day, that delivers 8,000 fibrinolytic units of nattokinase a day, 1,000 milligrams of bromelain, 1,000 milligrams of curcumin, and we can go higher. Now, Jordan Vaughn at the largest vaccine blood clot center in the United States in Birmingham, at his initial prescription, he's using 16,000 units of natto a day. So it's way more than our original version at 2,000 twice a day. Tanakawa has done pharmacokinetic studies, so we know that nattokinase gets in the bloodstream. It's like a drug. When you're taking that nattokinase, it's derived from the fermentation of soy or chickpeas. And so some people have a soy allergy. So at Wellness Company, we use the derivative from chickpeas. We don't have to worry about that. And caveats are, bleeding and easy bruising. But most people, the risk is forming blood clots, not bleeding. So once people have been on McCullough Protocol, spike detoxification, I've never seen a vaccine cardiac arrest or a new blood clot. Now, today I had a patient who had a history of blood clots in 2018, did not take the vaccine, had COVID. He was on the detox and he developed a new blood clot in his leg. Now, it promptly dissolved. He went on blood thinners and upped his detox, and it dissolved within 6 weeks. But so I've been humbled. Nothing has a perfect track record in medicine. But of interest, when I published this approach, the spike detoxification, we said it's a base. We can add other drugs to it and other interventions, but we thought this was fundamental. When my very first post of this on Instagram, I'll never forget, I posted it. Immediately, I got a tag on it from the censorship. It says, this doesn't work. How do they know? It was just proposed. So what I learned is the censorship apparatus was waiting for someone to discover nattokinase, was waiting for this. So they actually know all the steps ahead of time. This biopharmaceutical complex that wants never-ending mass vaccination, no matter how many vaccine injuries, they actually know all the steps ahead of time. They were waiting for someone in a public position to find nattokinase.
Okay, that's fascinating. On the censorship side, that's fascinating. But the protocol in itself is fascinating as well. And I like the fact too that if you want to go at it on your own, and like I did, right? I got my bromelain, I got my nattokinase, I have my curcuma, and you outline it very well in the paper. So it's very easy to follow. Or you can go to the Wellness Company and just get it more conveniently.
But David, let me ask you how much you're taking. What are your doses?
So so this is 100 milligram or 2000, I guess FUs is functional units. So I take 2 of those. Oh, shoot. You jumped out there for a second.
I think your nattokinase knocked out the internet connection.
Yeah. Hey, they don't want us getting that information.
Right. There you go.
There you go. I've had a lot of weird stuff going on.
Well, there you go.
Since I started the podcast.
The nattokinase.
Like this is like, we're not live on the internet, but I have so many weird things going on with my phone and my computer that I'm starting to get paranoid. Not to mention I was surveilled. I know that for a fact because I saw the guys. That was during the COVID pandemic, but we've got a whole other issue here in Canada with people speaking out. But that being said, nattokinase. So it's 100 milligram per tab. So 2000 FUs, which is functional units. I'm not sure.
Fibrillary units, right.
Okay. I take 2 of those. So I take 200 milligrams.
At one time, or do you take it spread apart?
I take it in the morning and at night. So two times. So during the day, that'd be 400 milligrams. Yeah.
So you take 2 tablets twice a day or 1 tablet?
Yes. 2 tablets twice a day.
Okay.
Morning and
very good.
at night.
You're getting 8,000 of natto. That's good. Now take it on an empty stomach.
Okay. I usually take it with breakfast and with supper.
No. It's got to be empty stomach. You're not going to, it's got to get into, if it's taken with food, it gets preoccupied with the food stream.
Okay. And so the whole protocol,
empty stomach. So what I do is if I get up at night to pee, I know my stomach's empty. I'll take my capsules. I get up in the morning, first thing in the morning, I take them. You can take it with coffee or something else, but don't take them with meals. You're not going to get the full benefit.
Okay. That's really good to know. And the same, the bromelain, I take 2 of everything. So bromelain here is 500 milligrams per capsule. So you get 1,000 of bromelain.
So you're actually doing pretty good detox. And how about the curcumin?
I don't have it on me, but it's I think it's 1,000 IUs. Does that make sense per tab?
1,000 milligrams, and you take 1,000. So you're taking.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so there you go. So David's taking big time McCullough Protocol, spike detoxification. Just needs to tune it up on an empty stomach. Have you had your spike antibodies measured to see where you are?
No, I mean, I have a hard enough time getting a blood test and getting my testosterone tested, let alone spike protein. I don't even know if we can do that test here, to be honest. If I just ask my doctor, I'm assuming he would know what test to run. But
you should try to ask him. LabCorp, a big company, they measure it. So does Quest. I bet your Canadian labs do. Now, how long have you been doing it for?
Oh, geez. So it's been on and off, so it hasn't been consistent. No, I knew you were coming on the show, so I started doing it again. But I started in 2023. Does that make sense? Is that when your protocol came out?
Yeah.
it was almost, it was probably the post on Instagram that I saw initially. I was like, I need to get on this. So I read the paper. I was like,
Okay.
okay, cool.
Okay, good.
And so I did it for the better part of 2023. And now I just kind of restarted. So I had about a year
So
off.
you got very good coverage, so that's great to hear. You know what I had? I didn't take the shots, but I had COVID 3 times. My ears are ringing. I don't feel like I could run as good as I used to, what have you. And I've been on it a year now. I've been pushing hard. My ear ringing is 90% better now. I can barely notice it. I'm back to running full stride, feel great. I have almost all of my patients feel better. The antibodies against the spike protein drop. I can't wait to remeasure mine, see if they drop. We've published a case of a young man, Iowa State, myocarditis, serious myocarditis from the vaccine. And his spike antibodies dropped from about 12,000 to 2,000. His EKG cleared up, everything cleared up. He had transient heart failure, needed a lot of drugs. And so the spike protein detoxification has been key. We've seen resistant blood clots dissolve. You know, the blood thinners don't dissolve clots. It's actually the nattokinase and bromelain that are clot dissolvers. It also, you actually have protection from getting COVID again when you take these. This is important. So they're kind of anti-COVID as well. And then if you're older like me, I've got some blockages, some atherosclerosis. The Chinese and Japanese use these as anti-atherosclerosis. They actually help unclog some arteries. So it works differently than a statin does, for instance. So this is all good. It's natural. You can do it yourself. I've published posts on, self-management of detoxification. So a wellness company, we've got the combined products. The light duty product is called Spike Support. And then the triple all-in-one combination is called Ultimate Spike Detox. We have some other products that are of interest. You can get them now on Amazon through Canada. Canada doesn't allow a wellness company to directly do business, but you can do it through Amazon. Check out Mind Lift. Mind Lift is for those with brain fog, and it has ashwagandha, lithium orotate, some other key. It's a great product designed by Dr. Drew. A lot of people know him. But Dr. Drew, by the way, is on national TV tonight in the United States. He just followed me. I was on one show and I came back for years. And then we have Elevated Energy. I just got that from my wife. It helps pick up people's energy. It has picolate, PQQ, and other kind of natural energy boosters. And then the last is Heart Support. Heart Support has beetroot extract, the water-soluble vitamins needed, medicinal grade selenium, and everybody needs that for the heart. So those 4 products, there are so many people who have taken the vaccine and who have had long COVID. The doctors aren't helping them anyway. But I said, look, go to a wellness company, try this natural approach, and then if prescription drugs are needed after that, it can be on top.
Well, I mean, the U.S. started to make America healthy again trend. And, I've got my Make Canada Healthy Again mug. And part of it is really taking personal responsibility for your own health. And sure, pharmaceuticals play a role, especially in acute instances where you need something to fix a blood clot or you're under cardiac arrest. I understand that. But ultimately, our health comes down to the little things that you do every day. And even if all your spike protein is gone out of your bloodstream after using your protocol, the ingredients here, bromelain, nattokinase, curcuma, these are all amazing things to consume in general because they're anti-inflammatory for the most part, which would contribute to, the host of inflammatory diseases that we have that are crippling our society as a whole. So it's really interesting that we're kind of coming full circle and we're starting to refine our connection with nature and natural products so that we can actually regain our health and become healthier human beings. Doc, this has been such an amazing conversation. My mind's still spinning about the whole operation, about getting the vaccine out and the whole process of going from A to Z and the all-in factor there. So I'm going to digest that over the next little bit, and all the information that you're able to give us and all the insights have just been absolutely incredible. And I hope that for a lot of the veterans that are listening out there, especially the Canadian ones that haven't been able to kind of get anybody to listen, especially the medical establishment, have just been gaslit. This is the start. This is your first step. If you haven't heard about this protocol, start it. I'll post a link to the paper. I'll post a link to the wellness, the wellness company, so you can get your supplements, and definitely share this episode with as many people as possible. Let's start making each other more responsible for our health and getting healthier and recovering from this crazy 4 years of pandemics. Dr. McCullough, before we sign off, again, I appreciate your time and all your insights. Do you have any last parting words for our audience?
Well, I just want to thank the opportunity. Audiences are important. Us in America, we don't think too much about the Canadian military, but they're important. We know about the Rocky Mounted Police. The population of Canada is roughly the same as Texas. Okay, and that's where I am right now in Texas, and the military in Canada are incredibly committed, highly skilled professionals that I think are very career oriented. They do it basically for their career, and the public appreciates and is indebted to their service. And we all want to see our military members, recover. Now, in the United States, the Trump administration did drop any vaccine mandates for the military and actually invited them back if they were kicked out because they didn't take the vaccine. They invited them back with back pay who were kicked out. And you know what? Very few people came back.
Of course not. Of course not. It's hard to go back. I compare it to a very bad breakup.
Okay.
Where there's a lot of animosity. The military is what is, for me especially, I became a man in the military. So the military was like my second father. So the institution I believed in deeply. I went to war. I fought for Canadian values. And then when they break the rules, when they act in ways that would make your stomach turn, when they would disrespect the service of a lot of us, if they hand out or stretch the olive branch and say, no, come on back, you're not going to go back. And I commend President Trump for making that offer. I think it's the right thing to do. I've commented about it here on my show. Would we do the same here in Canada? There's not a peep. There's not a peep at all because we've essentially tried to forget about this whole ordeal. One of our Freedom Convoy organizers, just had her on the show yesterday, just got her sentencing for organizing the convoy. It's bad. So the powers that be just don't want to talk about this. So I'm really appreciative of your time and hope that this can start changing the narrative here in Canada a little bit and awaken some people that are still asleep as to what actually went on over the last 4 years and how to get healthy and stay healthy in the future. So I appreciate everything that you do here, Doc, and it's been a real honor.
Great. Well, listen, let me just give you a couple sites to follow. So make sure everybody sign up for Focal Points. That's my Substack. It's the leading medical Substack out there. You get a free email every day at about 5 a.m. Give you the latest breaking videos, abstracts, studies, announcements. You got to get Focal Points. It's the best in class. My podcast is America Out Loud Talk Radio McCullough Report. You get that at America Out Loud. I have a lot of Canadian listeners. And on Wednesdays on Pulse, I take questions. So it's your chance to ask a question, have it come on the show. And I've been doing that for 4 years. Make sure that you check out my book, Courage to Face COVID-19. I have a new one coming out on the history of vaccines. And I tell you, it's a dark history. It didn't start just with this COVID vaccine. Believe it or not, there's a lot of history here. We're going to review it with best-selling author John Leake. And then lastly, for support, go to McCullough Foundation, McCulloughFND.org. That supports all of our video operations, our huge media footprint, our efforts in the courts. And I've been in the Canadian courts as well as the Royal Colleges supporting doctors like Mark Trowsey and Dr. Charles Hoffey. We prevailed in the case of Dr. Charles Hoffey. And we've been closely following Tamara Lynch and all the key Canadian heroes, Roger Hodkinson. I know them personally. I've given lectures in Toronto, in Alberta, Edmonton, Red Deer, Victoria. I've done everything I can. My wife's Canadian. My wife's mother lives with us. She's 92. She's Canadian. And, we just finished, my wife just with her mother finished Canadian taxes. I just finished American taxes. And what we concluded, David? We concluded taxes is our biggest household expense. It's the biggest thing we spend money on. So I'm with you. Governments have let us down. We pay them. They're our employees. We need to take back our countries. Again, thank you so much for having me on the program. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
Thanks so much. And folks, don't forget, train hard, fight easy. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.